morning I spoke about the 4 things, and they told me I only said about 3, but I said they weren't listening. I did say the 4th, but I put them in a different order. But anyway, I'd just like this afternoon to talk to you, and I don't, I'm doing this because, about the Eucharist, because I don't think that I could tell you anything that you don't know, but I'm going to share with you what I say to the laity and to people around the world about the Eucharist. Because first of all, brothers, I don't think that a lot of Catholics have any idea what Mass is. And I think, you know, since Vatican II, Mass has come now to the vernacular and European. It's wonderful, a great grace. But there's sometimes the danger is with the Mass that the priest's personality can overshadow the sacrifice, what it really is. And people go then after the priest and his popularity, and people say, I don't get anything out of Mass because I don't like Father so-and-so, and I love this charismatic priest, and I don't like this priest, and it's boring, and I get more out of watching EWTN than go to Mass now. And you hear all these things, and it brings you to realise that what's missing is a catechesis on the Eucharist and on the real presence. And that's why, for a long time now, I've prayed, and I realise that, and I've said this to some of you in talking, that priests are it's a very difficult, I wrote down here, in fact it was some of the notes too that Kevin and myself shared, that the priesthood today is experiencing great weakness. And why is it to experience weakness around the world? Because of the opposition of a secular world. And because today, in not only in the church, but in governments, in around the world, all kinds of places, are being moved by human faith. Divine faith doesn't come into decisions. And this is why people believe what other people say. It's just like, to use the example, when you go into a restaurant and you order food, you take for granted that that food is safe to eat, that it's the right food to order. When you take things like this, we accept on what, when the newspaper comes out with stories, and half of them are exaggerated or lies, which I can tell you now, in insights, we'll give you the example. You know, for 40 over years, I've ministered to the Catholic royalty of Europe, all those Catholic royalty around Europe. Now, what I read in the papers about, we'll say, the Grand Duke of Luxembourg, he's a saintly man. He just would not sign for euthanasia. He goes to Eucharistic adoration. They go on pilgrimages. One of the royal family have 4 children in religious life. They have adoration in their chapels. I give them, Kevin myself give retreats. But if you read the stories about their marriages and people take, that's, I don't know about the Protestant part of the families, you know, in England and that, but it's the same with the church. It's the same with the priesthood. It's the same with Church Militant and all these people. People believe, and nobody's there to defend the other side. And so people are formed, and this is, of course, it's a weakness. It makes the priest nervous. It makes him feel he's under attack, and things like that. So that's one of the big oppositions. And then that's the opposition to the media. And then there's opposition to your message, the message of the gospel. People do not want to hear the moral decisions of the Catholic faith or of the Christian faith. People walk out if you get up and speak about abortion. People will walk out if you talk about morality in any way. That's also common in many parts of the church. Many priests, because of the fear, change the gospel and disregard the teachings of the church because they're afraid. And you know, a couple of years ago, also a good while ago now, about 10 years ago, in Dublin, the Mass, the Sunday Mass, the reading was from Paul. Women, be submissive to your husbands. Husbands, you know that passage. And the bishops' conference told the priests they could leave it out. Take out that part at the Sunday readings, because it would be offensive to the congregation, and the women especially. So they did it. But I was out in Donnybrook, in one of the parts of Dublin, more upper class, and I was at Mass on a Sunday there, and it was a Benedictine, former Benedictine from England who was said the Mass. He gave a brilliant homily, and he read the whole reading. He read the reading as it was in the book, and he explained it in detail what it meant, that they leave out the second part, husbands lay down their lives, you know, and you know. So afterwards, I thought, well, I'm going to phone him and congratulate him. So I phoned the presbytery, because he was living there, and I knew by his voice, I was thinking, oh my God, here's a radical feminist nun calling me up, she's going to devour me for all the things I said. And I said to him, Father, I just want to thank you. And many people said the same, because I said, you know, that's what's happening. We're afraid it's not your word, and sure, you know, Paul may not have liked women and what, and all these things they say to you, or talking about the different issues in the scriptures. But he said to me, Sister Briege, you have no idea how I never was nervous. But he said, I couldn't pick a big lump out of the reading and just leave it out, because it was going to be offensive to and it's the same with concelebrating masses. I mean, somebody was talking about Vincent, what's his name, in Philadelphia, one of the priests, Vincent
Ford.
No, it was a priest very prominently charismatic. I knew him.
Vincent Walsh.
Vincent Walsh. Well, Vincent, he was a Monsignor, wasn't he?
Yes.
He was telling me one day that he was doing a jubilee. Maybe I told you this. He was doing a golden jubilee for these elderly sisters in some area, and he was the main celebrant. But these women were golden jubilarians, so they had a few of them had brothers priests or nephews priests, so they were all there. And Vincent walked in, and he was into the sacristy, and there's nobody except himself. And he looked out, and he saw the priest sitting in the front row, and he said to the sister, "What about the priests? Aren't they going to concelebrate?" And she said, "No. We don't want an altar full of men." So Vincent said to her, "You don't really want me either, but you can't have Mass without me, so you can do it, your sister. I'm not saying Mass if they don't say Mass with me." And she pulled in her heart. And the old sisters were delighted, because it was one of these radical who were going to dictate. And that happened in Adelaide, in Australia. When we were out there, the bishop, who was the president of the Conference of Bishops, asked all the other bishops, men, major superiors, because they had a big conference with major superiors of men and women's orders and the Conference of Bishops. And he told them all to sit down, that he didn't want to offend the women there. And half of the bishops got up and said, "It's not acceptable." It's not, you don't have to apologise for being a priest, and you don't have to be intimidated by opponents, because that's where, and we often talk, because Kevin experienced this in places, very, very hostile towards him. But people with faith, people who have divine faith, don't act like that. That is not that's not from the law. That's not the work of the Holy Spirit. This divisiveness, or this anger towards, and this terrible feminism was born. A daughter of Charity said to Kevin, she taught at one of the big universities, and she was a great woman. And Kevin said, when he quoted it, he said, "No, I'm not saying this." He told all kinds of people. He said, "This daughter of Charity taught some university here, and she taught history and something, church history and something else." And she said to Kevin once, she said, "Father Kevin, I can tell you can trace back all the things that went wrong in history with what went wrong with women." Because she said, the saying, the woman that rocks the cradle rules the world. And we could say that in the church as well, because the influence that the religious system, and there's great women, and they were hurt by, I mean, I got many a hurt from priests. We all go through. Those things happen. But, you know, the children in our primary school, Catholic schools and colleges, many of these women had a great influence on them. And that was the bedrock of all of this lot of this confusion and anti-clericalism and anti-man. That's where the devil started. Not in the simple people sitting in your pews or the people who had divine faith, the charismatics, but in the very well-educated, good women. But they were fed. And this was what happened to the Irish sisters. They came over here, and we had an Irish priest came over here to New Orleans to do a course, and he said it was on Catherine of Siena, I don't know what, some course. He said, I was the only man there, and he said, I was petrified. I was among all these people, women who were very hostile. He was shocked. But that's why, you know, it's not of the Spirit. And thanks be to God, it's much better. I don't think it's as bad now. It never affected my order too badly, because we, thanks be to God, I work with clergy and I never had any problem. My congregation gives me complete, and they know all about me and how I love the priesthood, and I went on television, I have no desire to be ordained or no desire, and I tell them it's nobody's right, not even the priest, to get ordained. It's God's plan, it's God's law. And you know, I could go on things, but one of your most powerful strengths to root you in the strength you need as a Catholic priest is the Eucharist. Because if you're a Eucharistic priest, if you meet Jesus, and I'd like to just look at it and share with you how I share it in 3 ways with the laity. First of all, I say to them, you know, in England and Ireland, we have 2 great women that stand out as martyrs for the Eucharist and for the priesthood. One is a lady in Dublin she was from County Meath in Ireland, called Margaret Ball. Margaret Ball married in Dublin into an upmarket family, but as Catholics at the time, you could not get a job in any kind of decent job in Dublin, especially government jobs or public jobs in civil service. It was, you know, during the Reformation. But she had a son, and the son was very ambitious. And as a young man, well educated, he made a decision. He was going to be the mayor of the city of Dublin, the Lord Mayor. And in order to achieve this and to accomplish this desire, he had to abandon the Catholic faith. So his dear mother was horrified, and that she tried everything. She would bring in Jesuits from the continent for dinner, they'd be at her house, to try and get him back into the faith. But he was, you know, ambition is very important. We tell you, you have to have some ambition in life. But it's like in the political scene today. People will sell their soul for ambition to get what they want. They'll deny the faith. They'll embrace whatever is going to win them, right? Well, this was the same. This young man, he gave his right as a Catholic. He knew his faith, but he couldn't get his job. So he said he was going to join, as they said, they take the prayer book and accept, you know, what was happening in the church, with the Church of England. But his mother kept at him. And eventually he won the seat, the Lord Mayor of Dublin. He had his mother arrested. And she was dragged through the streets of Dublin on a harrow as an elderly woman. And she was in Dublin Castle, which was the seabed of persecution for Catholics, for those who would not accept the new religion being forced on the Irish. She spent the remaining years being persecuted and tortured, and she died from torture. All because she would not abandon her faith, but she would not. One of the things they wanted her to do was to stop providing a place for priests, because priests were on the run, and they would come in from the continent, newly ordained from the French seminaries or wherever, and they would live. When you think about it, there's places in rocks, hills, where the priest would hide. And many of the young people in Cork and down in the south would dress up as a priest and go out when they would come looking for them, and they'd give their lives so that the priest could be saved. That was the depth of it, and so that the people could have Mass. There was nothing they wouldn't do. Margaret Little died, Margaret Ball died, and I say to the people, is it worth dying for? I mean, why would you die for the Eucharist? Why are there so many martyrs? And even to this day in Nigeria and all over, people are being tortured, people are being persecuted. And you have in the communist, atheistic countries, when we give the first retreat in Lithuania in 70 years after the fall of communism, and we met some of those bishops. My God, the torture they went through, and meeting these men who were sent to concentration camps. We give a retreat in the Czech Republic, and on the wall in the Czech Republic, we had a big group of priests from different parts of Europe, and on the wall was a plaque, full size of the wall, of priests and bishops and religious order priests who were, and this was only in the 70s, this isn't 100 years ago, who were arrested, put into this, they took over the Norbertine big monastery, they put them all in there, made them work out in the fields, starved them, and allowed them to die. And they died for what? Because of the priesthood. On the other side, you have also, you ask yourself, why would you die? Why do these people? Then you cross over to England, and Margaret Clitheroe was a beautiful story. We used her as the patron saint for the intercession in England. She's from Yorkshire. She was a young Yorkshire mother, great Catholic, and harboured priests and hid them so that they could have Mass. And so they had, like, what we would look into is an underground. They would have the friends come in and have the Mass with the priest in secret. And she had a family of children, and she was pregnant herself when one of the informers came into the Mass and informed on her, and she was arrested. She was taken to court, put on trial, and the judge, when he saw she was pregnant, tried to be lenient, and he asked her to swear, to come up and take an oath, that she would never allow a Roman priest, a papal Mass, or anything to do with him in her house again. And her husband was not a Catholic, but he was very supportive of her. He tried everything. And as she is being on that stand, they're pleading with her. It's a little bit like Thomas More, you know. They're pleading with her not to, because she's young children, she's pregnant. But she stood there and made her commitment that she would never turn away a priest. She would, if she could have Mass, she would do it. And because of that, she was pressed to death, her child and herself. Now, what I say to the laity, when telling them, I say, why would those two women, and the thousands and hundreds since the beginning of the Catholic Church, why would these people die? What is the Eucharist? Would you die? I'd say to them, would you die for your priest? Would you die for the Eucharist? For this gift? And then I say to them, let's look at the Eucharist in three ways. First of all, the greatest event that ever happened on this universe that you and I call home, our place, was that God sent his beloved Son, Jesus. Jesus came here, but he came with one mission. Because of sin, because of the fall of our first parents, because of the destruction of this beautiful gift, that God sent his beloved Son, Jesus. And from the moment of Jesus' conception, he started a journey towards Calvary. His mission was to go to Calvary, to shed his blood, to stand before the Father with all the poison, everything that sin caused, and to nail it to the cross, to give his own life. That was the first, that's what Jesus did. So, that's the first thing. The Passion, he died, he conquered sin and death, and he rose from the dead. Now, only Jesus could have thought of a way, because that victory was for everybody. It doesn't matter who we are. It opened the way to salvation, and it conquered Satan. We were no longer, as Paul said, enslaved to sin, because the victory is won for us. We now have the freedom, the choice to go to eternal life, because Jesus opened that way. And I say to them, on Holy Thursday night, don't you know that this affects everybody from the beginning to right now? And what did Jesus do? He had, you couldn't put words up, this is the way I say it. God had a plan. And he knew that we need the benefits of that victory. We need to be able to be present at the victory because it's on our behalf. So what's happening on the altar is not going to, it happened one time and it doesn't need to happen because he won the victory. But what God did was he chose men. He didn't choose angels, I say. He didn't choose saints. He chose ordinary men who he was able to form in those 3 years of preparation to form them. And then he gave them the most extraordinary power through his Holy Spirit. And what did he give them? That every time they would come to the altar, as Padre Pio said, the moment you step into the Mass with the opening the Eucharist, time ceases. We are back at Calvary. We are back at the victory. And when we read the Gospels, you know, and during Passion Week, people say, oh, I wouldn't have allowed that. We today are present, but how do we act? I say to them, look at every Mass is first of all a sacrifice. It's the sacrifice of Calvary. It's the salvation. God won salvation. You are able. It's the most powerful gift. And the reason the Catholic Church makes it an obligation for Catholics to go to Mass is not because God needs us, but we living in this world need the benefits of the victory. And like the mother the Church is, knows that we are weak. We are fighting not a flesh, but the powers of darkness. So the victory is placed there for us to come so that we have the power to fight, to claim. It's like having a fridge full of food and starving. If we open the fridge, we can get the benefits. It's the same with the Mass. So I tell them, Mass is not entertainment. And it's not about how you feel. And it's not all these things that you've made. Every Mass is charismatic. In the dungeons of prisons in China, where many of the missionaries were, and had only a thimble of wine and a little piece of bread. It's with the powers that God gives them, the desire. Jesus comes, the victory comes, everything happens in that enclosed cell. And that's what one of the old priests, Paddy Riley was his name, good Irish name, he came into the intercession. He was 87, and he was in China in prison. And it was a good while ago. But I will never forget, there was about 90 priests who were all sitting around, and we didn't expect him to talk. He was a Columban father. And he gave the most beautiful testimony about being arrested as a young priest in China. He was one of the first probably went out there, and he said he had only one, the hardest was that he was locked up, he was beaten, he was persecuted, but he prayed and prayed, if I could only say one Mass. And he told how he lost his eyesight, was losing his sight because of starvation and no vitamins, but they gave him medicine. And they asked him, he had money in his pocket when he was arrested, and they said to him, trying to make it look that, they weren't as bad, they wanted to know what could they give him. And he said he'd like some grapes. And he used to get one piece of hard bread, but there was a rat in the cell. I remember vividly him telling the story. And he used to have to hide the bread because the rat would eat the bread in him. But he'd give him a little bit. But he said, when he got this, he had a little bottle, and he took the cuff of the shirt that he had on him for months, some months out, he took it off, and he squeezed the juice of the grapes, and he left it hidden. And he said, you can't imagine. I had to do it in 10 minutes because this is why, remember, the Pope gave, could say the short canon, and he said there was a guard out there, and when he was away with somebody else, I had to find a moment. He said, I put my sleeve down, I washed it in the water they give me to wash myself, and I put it down, and it was dry, and he said, in less than 10 minutes, he said, the joy and he said to the priest, look at these two hands, look at your hands. Think of it, fathers. Jesus, people couldn't get into that prison. We were padlocked into these awful cells. And yet, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, because I was given this gift, I could ask. And he said he received. He did the consecration, and he had to take it fast. And he said he doesn't remember, he went into ecstasy. And he said the next thing he remembers, he doesn't know how long it was, as one of the guards came in, used to come in every day and interrogate them, and really demonic. And he said when the guard looked at him, he started screaming, and he ran out. He didn't know what happened. He said, why did you run out? And later, the guard told him that when he came into the cell, he was full of light. It scared the life out of the guard. He was illuminated. And Father Paddy said to the priest, he said, fathers, I beg one thing of you. Don't underestimate the gift that you have to bring this gift to the people of God, the Eucharist. And whatever you do, don't ever neglect saying it. He said, I found out the day I said the Mass, that Mass was the 15th of August. You've great devotion to Our Lady. Now, so that's the first thing I say at the beginning. The Mass is the sacrifice. And I keep begging, and this is why I say about the popularity of the priesthood. You know, it can become where the people are focusing on the priest and they value the Mass that way. They evaluate the Mass on the personality of the priest or on all the things around the altar. I heard a priest say one time that when he was at Mass one day, he had to speak on vocations, you know, and he said, we had the most beautiful liturgies. And he said they were really reverent and beautiful. We had lectors, we had, you name it, altar boys, we had altar girls, we had all kinds of things around the altar. He said it was beautiful and it was decorated and everything. So he said, we're all going to present the middle aisle of the church, he said. So I stepped back and stayed in the sacristy. And they all went singing away. Where's Father? No priest. 3 minutes went. 2, it sounded 3, probably a couple of minutes. And everybody said, where's Father? And he walks out at the top. And he says, did you miss me? He got the point across. You can have beautiful services, but if you don't have the priest, you know. And that's the difference in, this is what I always say to the people. So I love going to the charismatic prayer meetings. I get more out of it than Mass. I look at them and think, oh my God, you know. But isn't it true that we get distracted with, and we go for the icing but not the cake. That's the second thing I tell them is, can you imagine, brothers? And I say, that we actually, in the Catholic Church, have communion with the victim. That we have communion. We can walk down that aisle and we know that this is the body, blood, soul. This is a person. This is Jesus. It's a mystery. And the mystery, that what I was telling, I think, one of the fathers, that I said to Father Pablo the other day, the two of us were praying together for priests, because I get a lot of calls from priests, you know, and I said to him, you know, I have this vision of a big building, and there's a man on the top of the building hanging out of the window. He's in a terrible condition. And I said, I see the two of us going up on a ladder, and you throwing him across your shoulder and bring him down to the 2nd level. It's safe up there. And the sense the Lord said to me was, we have to rescue priests from here and bring their faith to here.
Amen.
A rescue squad. So maybe we should give them that name. But anyway, because it's mystery, yes, but when you pray and when you ask for that gift of understanding, you know, one of the gifts of the Holy Spirit is understanding. What does it mean? For me, it means I pray every day, help me to understand my Catholic faith. There's things I have no answer for, but I in my heart, I believe. And that's what those illiterate little people around the world who don't have any degrees in theology or have understand, they have the faith, and their faith brings them understanding of mysteries in the heart. And they'll die for you. They'll die for priests. They'll die for the Eucharist. And that's why when it comes to Holy Communion, a woman came to me in Sydney, lovely young woman, and she was in a desperate state because she had stage 4 cancer and she was all swollen. She was in a novel state. And she was from the west of Ireland, but she was out in Australia. She had married, she had 4 children, good husband. And so on a Saturday morning, we were in the Patrician Brothers High School, and we were giving a morning of renewal for a big group of people. And she came running up and she was crying and she said, "Oh, Sister Briege, please, I just got a terrible bad word." And she was going, trying to hope for her, and she had all kinds of problems. So I asked her, which I do, and people are not politically correct, but I said to her, "Are you Catholic?" Because she was so desperate. And I said, "Are you practicing Catholic?" And she said, "No, I don't go to Mass because Sister tell you the truth is boring." I looked at her, and her name was Colette, I think. I said, "Colette, let me ask you a question." I said, "You're telling me," I said, "you come all the way rushing in here for Sister Briege." And I said, "Do you see that church over there? There's a church across the street from the high school." I said, "There's Mass there at 4 o'clock today, and Jesus is coming in person." So I questioned her about her. She said that she was married in the Catholic Church. They used to practice, but they got out of the habit, and they didn't bother going. She said, we're spiritual or religious, or one of these things they say,
Spiritual,
Yeah.
religious.
I'm spiritual, but not religious. Well, anyway, I said to her, "Colette, let me tell you, Jesus is over there, and you're telling me that she's in a proper marriage, there's nothing to stop her from going." Another husband who's Catholic also. I said, "You know what you do?" I said, "Jesus comes every day on the altar," and I give her the whole thing about Holy Communion and about the Eucharist. And I said, "We can meet Jesus personally. You don't need Sister Briege. You, as a Catholic, you go up. When you put your hand to your tongue, that is Jesus. That's the same healer who walked the earth." And I could see that she's kind of looking at me, And I said, "Do you know what you do? I know that over there, there's confession. She hadn't been back for, I don't know, all the other months and years, whatever." I said, "Why don't you go talk to the priest? There's confession before the Mass. Tell him you don't know how to." She said, "I don't know how to go to confession. I haven't been in years since I left Ireland, made my confirmation or something." So I said to her, "Why?" I said prayer. So she left. And the following Sunday, we were closing the conference, and she arrived back to me. And she was still very sick, but all excited. And she made a profound statement. She said, I think she was about 37 or 38. She said, "Sister, yesterday was the first time in my life that I really went to Mass, knowing what was going on." And she said when she went to the priest and he helped her, and she said when she was walking up to Holy Communion, she said, "I kept telling myself, oh, I'm going to meet." Because I tell the priest the same. When you're stop before you and think, what am I doing? This is the person I'm going to, in one moment is going to come in this altar because of the power he's entrusted to me. I'm going to meet him. So she said when she got Holy Communion, she said, "No, I didn't feel." I tell her feelings doesn't make that. It's not, we don't live on feelings. Jesus never said by your feelings you're healed. He did say by your faith. She said when she was walking back, the biggest fear she had was death. Because she was scared of the unknown. But she said as she's walking back, she said, "Sister, I don't know whether I'm healed or not. But to tell you the truth, something happened to me." 3 days later, the Sydney Herald, which is a big paper in Sydney, had a feature article on her. Because the following day, when they went in for the treatment, and she was dying to sickle to death, she was completely free of cancer. That's the power of communion. And I see that. I have seen more people who get healed through the Eucharist than anything else. And especially, I tell people, make it a feeling, go to Mass every day for 9 days, for financial, whatever you have. But thanks be to God, I've had the great privilege and opportunity of talking about the Eucharist all over. And I know people have come back to Mass, and I see the fruits of when you just give them this simple explanation. And the third thing I tell them is about Eucharistic adoration. For Franciscans were the ones, through dear St. Francis, who was not a priest, not because he didn't feel worthy, but because he wasn't called, But Francis of Assisi was the one, you know, that, according to history and tradition, that introduced, if you keep the Holy Communion for the sick, we should lower it. But you know, in these years, since John, I can only talk from St. John Paul, because we used to have the 40, we still have, thank God, down in my parish, Lord, 40 hours adoration, but we didn't have this wonderful it's like an explosion of Eucharistic adoration around the world in the Eucharistic year. Well, you know, the one that taught me a lot about Eucharistic adoration, and you've heard me talk about it, was this former king of Belgium, King Budwin. King Budwin said to me one day when he was talking about Blessed Sacrament, and he said when he got married to Queen Fabiola, the Spanish girl, he had made a commitment as a young king before he was, because he was a very good Catholic, that he would spend time in adoration in the tabernacle. He had a little, in the apartment at the palace there in Lagan, there was a lovely little chapel. And he would go down there every day for an hour. And he would spend an hour or more in adoration. And he'd go real early in the morning. And one day, Fabiola said to him, "Where do you go?" You know, he was up at 6 o'clock, which is early for them, or 5:30. And he would disappear out of the bedroom over to the chapel. It was on the same corridor down. And he told me this himself. He said, you know, he said, I used to tell my darling Fabiola, I'm going to sunbathe. She said, what? In the days, there's not much sun, so definitely not at night. And then he described, he said, you know, when you're in here, the sun can be beaming in that sky and it won't do a thing to your skin. I came to America. I went out on Clearwater Beach and I thought there's not much sun. And after 4 hours, I was like a beetroot, burning. So people knew to look at me. What happened to Sister Briege? My God, my face was flying out. I was blisters. I was a terror. But I knew because I was feeling it. And he said, you know, when you go before Jesus in the real presence, and especially now in Eucharist, in all these people who come to Eucharistic adoration, he said, you don't have to do anything except have the motivation to go and spend time with Jesus. Because it's like the sun. If you go out in the sun and put your face to the sun, you don't have to say to the sun, please shine on me, come on, I want some sun. It happens. He said, when you go into the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, more powerful is the radiant treatment for the soul. Because your soul and mine are like a magnet towards God. Because the soul is what was made for God and has like a drawing towards everything that's holy. Of course now, with all that's happening, it's blocked out. It's like a block to stop us from having that opportunity. And that, he said, when it came to the day when he was to sign abortion, which was 1992, we were with him a short time before, and he was saying, I have to, this is my test. And I remember saying to Kevin, the king, he said, you know, everybody like me and you, Father Kevin, will someday before we reach our Creator, have that opportunity to talk about, to declare him before mankind. Who the beloved. And he said, I have to now make the decision. Nobody can help me. What am I going to do? I'm being asked to sign for abortion. And he went to the Parliament, or where it was, the Prime Minister's, and the captain for ages saying, you know, it's not personal because you're representing the country and we need your signature. And the captain there for hours to try and get him. There was a big group in the Parliament pro-abortion. It was one of the first countries and in the UN and the EU to do this. So after a couple of hours, he finally said, he tried everything to get them to see. And he said, I will abdicate the throne. The throne is not as important to me. He said, I meet the King of Kings every morning. How could I decide that yesterday it was murder, and because I signed, today it's all right? And he said, I can't do that. I don't have the right. I can't stand before my Creator, my King. And so he abdicated and caused havoc in the country because they loved him. Even the pro-abortionist people, the people who were fighting to get this moved, were shocked that he would be willing to give up everything for it. So as he was walking back, I don't think I have the picture here with me, but he gave it to me. As he was walking back to the palace, where he was left, came from the government, he said, I remember him saying, I could die now. I passed the test. Because we don't know how it would react. Fear can make you do anything, And that's, I think, what's wrong with a lot of people. Peter didn't deny Jesus because he didn't love him. He denied him because he was scared stiff, and that's why. And that can happen to anybody. But anyway, when he came back to the palace, he said, he walked in, and on the corridor, to get all these gifts presented in the different parts of the country, he said he got this big, he didn't know what it was like, he knew it was a painting, but he had no idea, he never opened it. He'd been sitting against the wall, just inside the apartment, and for some reason, he went over and he opened it. And there was a famous artist called Briege from Belgium, and she had painted the Visitation with the two babies. You could see them in the womb, John and Jesus, and Mary and Elizabeth. And now this is first hand, because Budman told me this, and he sent me the image. And when his eyes looked at this picture, the four faces turned around, and he heard, thank you. And Lord of Mercy, Cardinal George had, because we'd been up, to speak at the seminary, and Cardinal George called me it was the year before he died, and he'd asked me, could I got the rights to the image? I have the rights. Bradley Bart gave me the rights to make it a Christmas card. It's beautiful. And poor Cardinal George wanted to know, could I give him the rights? So I said, you can get the rights from the lady who painted it. But he died before he got it. But I remember him saying it struck him very deeply. And and Budman said at the end of all that, he said, that's because he said, I have to attribute it to my time spent every day with Jesus in Eucharistic adoration. He loved you. When Eucharistic adoration came, he loved him. He and I would sit in there often. He had a big influence on all the young people in all those royal families. But I tell the people, look at it. It's not easy to get people, and I can understand priests when they can't put the 24 hours, again. It's not always easy because but it is, in every parish should try and have some time. And sure, the people won't come if they don't know what it is. But one priest in Ireland, what he did, which I thought was a great idea, up in I think it was in Donegal, he said, look, we're going to have Eucharistic adoration. If you can come as a family, if you can't come, your grandmother, somebody represent and watch with Jesus for an hour. And that's ours, belong to your family. You come and be with Jesus. And it's amazing how people felt responsible that they had to watch with Jesus. There's all kinds of ways you find. But I tell the people, I said, that come to Jesus. And I'd say to you as priests, how often Kevin said to the fellows, go out to parish churches in the morning time to say your prayers, and Mrs. So-and-so comes up and she wants a card signed. Somebody else comes over to you, and he used to say, this for a year, he'd say, look in Ireland anyway, in England and many places, maybe here, you have an empty room with old pictures of the former bishop and junk. He said, clean it out, get a nice armchair, get a carpet in it, get a carpenter or something to make you a nice little tabernacle, spend a bit of money and get a little monstrance, put it in the tabernacle, don't tell anybody you have it, and if the bishop says, what do you do? Tell him, I want a postinia. And if he doesn't know what a postinia is, tell him, it's a place to meet Jesus every day. Well, do you know, all over, priests have found this great, to have in their rectories, because we all have it in the convents. We all have it. And it's not especially in cold climates and places, you can't turn on the heat for the whole church for you coming in. But I have to tell you, I've seen so many priests from away. I went away up on a tour of the Arctic Circle, and I remember thinking, oh my God, how these OMIs live out in the middle of nowhere with these native Eskimos. And one of the old priests from Quebec, he looked like Santa Claus. He brought me and he said, Briege, I come in here with my cup of coffee in the morning time to Jesus. And he said, I sit and I say the Briege and I talk to him. And he said, I go off with, he had a gorgeous slave, the doctor, for the first Friday. But he says, I come in at night and sometimes I fall asleep with him. But he said he's great company. You wouldn't feel too lonely if you knew Jesus. I thought to myself, an old saint. He was probably 80. And that's why I'd say to you, those are the three things I tell the people. The Mass is the sacrifice. It's real. It's not feelings. It's the victory of salvation. And people have crawled to it. People died for it. Don't be telling me you can't come to Mass. The second thing, it's communion you can give. Go to Jesus. You Catholics we have a great gift. And that's why, isn't it sad when they don't believe? These statistics that 80% of the people don't believe it, they think it's a symbol. But maybe we don't preach enough on it. And the last thing I'd say is that to them is this about adoring Jesus. Whether he doesn't have to be in monstrance, but now our churches are locked, which is hard because they have to be in many places. But still, there's a lot of priests have little Eucharistic chapels. And so I say to you, fathers, make the Eucharist the centre of your priesthood. Spend time with Jesus, and it makes a difference. It makes a difference when we approach this great sacrament. It's the greatest gift. I try, which I can do because I live 5 minutes from one church and 10 minutes from the other. And Mass is at 8 and 9. So I go to 8 o'clock Mass. The priest doesn't know which parish I belong to because he sees me. But I say to myself, what a gift we'd be when we were out without it. We do. It was very hard. It was very hard on the priests themselves, but they could say Mass. But for the people, many people. Because American Catholics that are practicing are great people. They're great and they want they want to receive. So let's pray, and I pray tonight that when you're renewing your priesthood, ask Jesus. You have such an extraordinary gift. Don't ever let anybody intimidate you to hide your life under a bushel basket. Let it shine. Be proud in the right way to be a Catholic priest because of what God has endowed you with. And we love you. The people of God want holy priests, and that's why the fraternity. I'm so delighted that there's groups like you who have opened your lives to Jesus, and think of the thousands and millions of people you have touched through your willingness to say yes to this priesthood. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you. Always a blessing.